My name is Marilyn Givens, and I was 32 the night my sister used a family dinner to tell everyone I was a failure. It was a holiday meal at my grandmother's house in Minneapolis. The table was full and loud. I sat in my usual spot near the end, close enough to pass dishes, far enough that no one had to look at me. That had always been my job in this family. Stay steady, stay useful, stay quiet. My sister stood up with her glass raised like she was about to thank everyone for coming. Instead, she gave a short speech about how family sticks together and how some of us carry more than our share. I felt my stomach tighten. I knew where she was going. Then she aimed the whole room at me. In a few sentences, she painted me as the sibling who worked too much, cared too much about money, and still didn't measure up. She didn't need to say the word failure. Everyone heard it anyway. The laughter that followed wasn't nervous, it was easy, like they'd been waiting for someone to say it out loud. My parents didn't stop her. They smiled along and pretended it was just a joke. What none of them knew was that every bill they depended on, every automatic payment they never worried about, every safety net they took for granted, it all ran through me. While they were laughing, I was already making a decision that would change everything they thought was guaranteed. Before I tell you what she said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. Earlier that week, my life still looked organized from the outside. I worked in compliance for a regional bank, a stable job people described with a bored smile. My days were full of policies, spreadsheets, and other people's mistakes. At night, I went home to a small apartment that was quiet, tidy, and entirely mine. On paper, I was doing fine. In my family, that was exactly why I was treated like a walking solution instead of a person. I became the reliable one by accident. When I was in college, my debit card was the only one that still worked after a snowstorm knocked out power for days. I paid for groceries and gas. My parents promised they would pay me back as soon as the next paycheck cleared. They never really did, but they did discover something else. I would step in when things got uncomfortable. Over time, small favors turned permanent. First, it was adding one extra line to my cell phone plan, just until things settled down. Then it was putting a recurring payment on my card for a utility bill that was always a little late. After that came a credit card balance my sister said she would pay off quickly. None of it started as a demand. Every request arrived wrapped in the same soft language. You know how good you are with money. We will square it up soon. You are the only one we trust. I told myself it was temporary, that once everyone got back on their feet, I would quietly step out. Instead, the list grew. By the time I was in my 30s, a slice of nearly every paycheck went to something that did not belong to me. Insurance premiums, a streaming bundle I did not watch, a minimum payment on a loan I had never used. Every time I thought about canceling something, guilt showed up first. My older sister, Veronica Givens, liked to joke that I was the family fund. My father, Raymond, said it like a compliment whenever he told people his youngest daughter worked at a bank. My mother, Lorraine, would squeeze my arm and say I had always been so responsible, as if responsibility meant never keeping anything for myself. Veronica and I were raised in the same house but treated like we were living in different worlds. She was encouraged to chase dreams, change majors, try out new business ideas. If something fell apart, there was always a cushion waiting. I was encouraged to be practical, sensible, available. If something fell apart on my end, the assumption was that I would handle it alone. I could hear their voices in my head before I even picked up the phone. My mother calling me her strong girl. My father reminding me that family takes care of family. My sister laughing as she said she did not know how any of it worked, and that I was basically a wizard. They were not compliments. They were a script that kept me in place. The only person who ever questioned it was a woman from my office named Connie Frost. We shared the same break room table most days, eating reheated leftovers between emails. She had a way of raising one eyebrow when something did not add up. One afternoon, I mentioned a little too casually that I was paying for a phone bill that had someone else's name on it. Connie did not scold me or tell me what to do. She just asked one question. If they stopped saying thank you tomorrow, would you still feel okay covering all of that? I laughed it off, said it was not that big of a deal, that my family appreciated me. The truth was, I was not sure they did. I was sure that if any of those payments failed, the first call would not be to their providers. It would be to me. Connie had spent years cleaning up her ex-husband's debt. She warned me that money given without boundaries has a way of turning into an unspoken contract. The person paying starts to feel trapped. The person receiving starts to feel entitled. By the time anyone realizes it, the damage is already sitting in a file at some collection agency. As the holiday at my grandmother's house in Minneapolis approached, the list of things I was quietly funding felt heavier than usual. The season always brought more expenses, more excuses, more small emergencies that somehow landed in my lap. I kept telling myself I could get through one more gathering before I started changing anything. I just needed everyone to behave for one night. The evening at my grandmother's house arrived whether I was ready or not. Her place sat in a quiet neighborhood outside Minneapolis. Inside, nothing felt quiet. The noise, the overlapping stories, the familiar roles had all been rehearsed for years. I knew mine before I even took my coat off. My grandmother hugged me at the door, told me I looked tired, then added that it was good someone in the family still knew how to work hard. I smiled and said thank you, because that was easier than explaining that work was the only part of my life that ever made sense. From the dining room, I could hear my sister's laughter rolling over clinking silverware. She always made sure people heard her before they saw her. I stepped into the room and took everything in at once. My parents were already seated near the center of the long table. A couple of cousins were scrolling through their phones between bites of something from a plastic tray. My sister stood closer to the head of the table, telling a story that seemed to revolve around how exhausted she was from everything she was juggling. No one asked what those things were. When she spotted me, her smile stretched wider. She called out a greeting that sounded bright but landed heavy. My parents turned, relief crossing their faces in a way I recognized too well. To them, my arrival meant one thing. The reliable child had shown up, the one who could be counted on to fill any gap, smooth any awkward moment, quietly absorb whatever needed absorbing. I slid into a chair near the end of the table, the spot where it was easy to stand up and refill glasses or grab more food. Somewhere along the line, helping had turned into a performance I did without thinking. Pass the bread, grab more ice, check the oven. It was easier to move than to sit still and notice how invisible I could be in a room full of people who shared my last name. As the meal settled into its rhythm, small comments started to surface, the kind that sound harmless if you do not listen closely. My father mentioned how grateful everyone was that the phone situation was taken care of. My mother nodded and said I had always been good at managing things like that. A cousin asked, half joking, whether I had figured out a way to get some kind of reward from being the one whose card handled everything. No one looked at me when they said it. They looked at each other, at their plates, at their drinks. I sat there, feeling every word land like another item added to a bill I had not agreed to pay. I answered in short phrases and careful smiles. I did not correct anyone. I did not volunteer details. I did not say that I had spent part of the afternoon checking due dates and balances, so I would not miss anything tied to my account while I was out of the house. If I had said it out loud, it would have sounded obsessive. Silent, it just looked responsible. Across the table, my sister thrived under the attention. She talked about ideas she might pursue in the coming year, projects she might start, trips she might take. None of it had a plan behind it. It did not need one. In every version of her story, someone else would make sure there was a soft place to land if things went sideways. For a long time, that someone had been me. The longer I listened, the more I could feel two facts pressing against each other. They were glad I was dependable. They were bored by the kind of person that made me. I watched it play out in small reactions. A cousin's eyes lighting up when my sister described some vague opportunity. The same cousin glazing over when I mentioned a promotion I had earned months earlier. My life was useful, but hers was interesting. The room had already chosen which one was more important. At some point between the main course and dessert, conversations thinned into a softer murmur. Chairs scraped, glasses were refilled. My sister moved even closer to the head of the table, picking up a fresh drink, glancing down the line of faces as if she were measuring the room. I watched her hand tighten around the stem of her glass. Her posture straightened. Her expression shifted in that subtle way I had come to recognize over the years, the way it did whenever she decided the moment belonged to her. The room shifted when my sister lifted her glass a little higher. She did not ask for silence. She did not need to. The sound around the table thinned on its own, the way it always did when she decided something was about to be important. People turned toward her without thinking. I stayed where I was, hands flat against my napkin. She started with gratitude. She thanked our grandmother for hosting, thanked everyone for making the drive, thanked my parents for holding the family together. Her voice carried easily over the clink of cutlery. It was smooth, warm, practiced. I had heard versions of this tone at other dinners where she took the spotlight and no one seemed to mind. Then she shifted. She talked about how hard the last year had been, how much stress she had carried, how proud she was that the family always found a way to support each other. She said there were people in the room who gave more than others, who made sacrifices no one saw. Heads nodded. No one asked who she meant. They assumed they knew. I knew too. I just did not expect the direction. She turned her eyes toward me and kept talking as if I were not right there. She mentioned some people who were so wrapped up in their jobs they forgot what really mattered. She said focusing on money all the time was a sad way to live. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. Every sentence was shaped to fit only one person. A murmur ran down the table. Someone gave a soft laugh. My father exhaled like she had finally said something everyone had been thinking. My mother pressed her lips together, the half smile she wore whenever she wanted to appear neutral while clearly choosing a side. My face felt hot. My hand stayed still. My sister raised her glass higher and offered a toast. To family, she said, to the people who show up, to the ones who know that being successful is more than a paycheck, to everyone at this table who understands that. There was a heartbeat of quiet. Then she added one more sentence, light and sharp enough to split the air. And maybe, to the ones who still have time to figure that out. Laughter followed. It was not loud. It was worse than that. It was comfortable. The kind of laughter that said the joke was familiar, that no one felt the need to defend the person at the center of it. Something in me went still. The words landed, but they did not pierce. They settled over a history I already knew. Every unpaid favor, every promise that alone was temporary. Every time I had rearranged my life so that someone else would not have to rearrange theirs. This was not a slip or a bad joke. It was the truth of how they saw me. I did not make a speech. I did not stand up. I did not ask her to explain herself. The version of me who would have tried to smooth it over had been tired for years. Instead, I let the toast end. Glasses clinked. Conversations broke into smaller pieces. Plates were cleared to make room for dessert. When I moved, it looked ordinary. I pushed my chair back, said I needed a minute, and stepped away from the table. No one stopped me. They were busy with cake and coffee and each other. In the hallway, away from the noise, I took out my phone. The list waited in the banking app I checked more often than my own reflection. Automatic payments, linked accounts, stored cards for phone plans, and monthly extras that did not belong to me. I stared at it long enough for my thumb to steady. Then I started making changes. I removed my card as the primary payment method on the shared cell phone account. I canceled the transfer that covered a car payment I did not drive. I shut off a couple of subscriptions that had never been opened on my own devices. Each confirmation screen asked if I was sure. For the first time, I was. By the time I slid my phone back into my pocket and returned to the dining room, dessert plates were already half empty. My sister was scrolling through her own screen, barely listening to the person beside her. I watched her expression tighten as a notification slid across her display. Her brow pulled together. Her fingers moved faster. She looked up once, scanning the table as if something invisible had been moved. No one else noticed. The room was still warm, full, satisfied. For the first time, I let them enjoy it without paying for the feeling. That night, my apartment felt strangely new. I turned on the light, dropped my keys in the bowl, and stood in the doorway for a moment. Same couch, same table, same stack of envelopes on the counter. But the air felt different. For once, I had walked away from my family without trying to make anything easier. I went to the kitchen and washed the dishes I had left in the sink that morning. Simple work with a beginning and an end. When the counter was cleared and the trash was tied off, my hands had stopped shaking. One thought remained. I needed to see everything. I opened my laptop at the table and logged into my bank. The dashboard showed recent activity, the cancellations from earlier that night sitting in a small cluster. I scrolled farther back. Month after month of charges filled the screen. Premiums that covered other people. Transfers marked as help. Payments to companies I would never call for myself. I had lived inside this list so long that I had stopped seeing it. I started a spreadsheet. In one row, I wrote the headings: date, amount, what it paid for, who it served, how it began. Then I moved through the statements, tracing each line that did not belong to my own life, the phone bill tied to their number, the balance that should have ended months ago, the quiet withdrawals that always seemed too small to argue about at the time. The pattern was obvious on the page. This was not a pile of separate favors. It was a structure I had been holding up by myself. I remembered Connie in the break room asking if I would still feel okay if the thanks disappeared. Looking at the numbers, I could not remember the last time anyone sounded truly grateful. I could remember a lot of assumptions. When the list stretched beyond the bottom of the screen, I stopped. I did not need every last detail. I saved the file with a plain name that would not mean anything to anyone else. Just the date and 2 words: family support. Then I wrote a message. I addressed it to my parents and my sister with a plain subject line about the accounts in my name. In the body, I set out 3 facts. My information was off anything that was not mine. Remaining services had to be transferred by a set point or they would end, and I would not be taking on new payments. I kept it short. No speeches about respect. No list of every time I had stepped in. I attached the spreadsheet and sent it. The email left the outbox with a soft sound. Nothing dramatic. Just a small indicator that something permanent had shifted. I closed the laptop, showered, and went to bed without checking for replies. Sleep arrived quickly, deep and quiet. The knocking started early the next morning. Weak light had just reached the blinds when I pulled on a sweater and walked to the door. Serious things rarely stayed in emails in my family. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing in the hallway with a covered baking dish. I opened the door halfway. She smiled carefully and said she had brought a breakfast casserole so we could talk. The dish was wrapped in foil and looked heavy in her hands. Her words circled around tension, bad timing, holidays bringing out the worst in people, and a joke that went too far. She did not mention money or accounts or the file she had received. When she stopped, I told her I was clear on what I meant. I said I was finished paying for things that were not mine and that they would need to update their own information and handle their own obligations. My voice stayed even. I did not quote numbers or retell what had happened at the table. I said once that I was done. Her expression faltered, the way it does when someone realizes a familiar door has locked. She asked if I would really let everything fall apart. I answered that whatever broke now would be theirs to rebuild, not mine. There was no anger in it, only the feeling of finally saying something I had carried in silence. She looked at me for a long moment, then offered to leave the food anyway. I shook my head. She nodded once and walked down the hall with the casserole still in her hands. When I closed the door, the apartment was silent again. This time, the quiet felt like something I had chosen, not something I had been left with. A few days passed before anything else reached me. After work, I picked up my mail, sorting junk from things that actually mattered. One envelope was heavier than the rest, from a lender I did not recognize. My name was printed beside my parents' last name, lined up as if we had signed it together on purpose. Inside, the letter sounded like 100 notices I had seen in my job. Past due, late fees, attempts to contact the primary borrower, possible collection activity if payments did not resume. The account number was unfamiliar. The balance did not belong to anything in my life. But down in the section about responsible parties, my name appeared in bold. Somewhere along the way, I had been attached to a debt that was not mine. I took the pages to my kitchen table and tried to replay how that could have happened. Years earlier, my parents had asked me to look over some paperwork. They said it was just a consolidation to make things simpler, a way to pull messy bills into one place. I remembered checking the interest rate, pointing out a couple of lines, signing where a sticky note with my name had been placed. It had taken less than 5 minutes. They had thanked me like I had done them a small favor. Now that favor was the reason my name sat on a letter warning about what would happen if someone kept not paying. My first reflex was to treat it like any other problem file. Call the number. Ask about options. Arrange a payment to keep the account from staining my record. I could already see the steps in my head, the way the balance would shrink if I shifted my budget. That reflex was the same one that had built the pile of automatic payments I had just started to dismantle. Instead of dialing the lender, I called Connie. She listened while I read the key lines. When I finished, she reminded me that a cosigner is not a safety net. A cosigner is another owner. On paper, this account belonged to me as much as to the person who had stopped sending checks. Stepping in might protect my file, but it would also confirm the story my family already believed about me. I was the one who absorbed damage, so no one else had to feel it. After we hung up, I sat alone with the letter and the silence. I knew how fast one account could drag down a report. I also knew how quickly people learned to lean harder on the person who would always step in. Every automatic payment I had carried for my family, every transfer I had made, had trained them to see my stability as a resource instead of a choice. By the time the light shifted in the room, the decision was plain. If I paid this loan, I was agreeing to more envelopes like this one, more nights spent scrubbing away messes I had not made. If I refused, the fallout would land with the people who had treated my security like an endless supply and my boundaries like a joke. I picked up my phone and typed a short message to my parents. There was no anger in it, just information. I told them there was a loan carrying my name, that a notice had arrived about missed payments, and that I would not be taking over what was owed. I did not attach the letter or the spreadsheet from before. I did not ask what had gone wrong. The reply came from my sister. Her texts stacked on the screen in quick bursts. She insisted this was not serious, that I was making it into drama, that I understood credit better than anyone and should step in for now, because I could. The words blurred as my eyes moved over them. The message underneath stayed sharp. I was still being cast as the person who fixed what she broke. I let the screen dim without answering. A new alert lit it back up. This time, it was not from her. It was another notice from the lender, confirming that a recent payment attempt had failed again. The date lined up with the holiday dinner at my grandmother's house. While my sister had been lifting her glass and turning me into a punchline, the account with my name on it had already been sliding deeper into trouble. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand and felt the line inside me settle. I could not rewrite the signatures on that loan or teach my family how consequences worked. I could only decide whether I would keep standing between their choices and the results. For once, I chose to step aside. Time kept moving even when I stopped answering. The morning after I refused to cover the loan, my phone lit up with notifications. From the previews, I could see the pattern. My parents wanted to talk about fixing things. My sister wanted me to step in, just until it sorted. No one mentioned the toast or the word failure. I put the phone face down and left it there. Real news came from the edges, not from them. A cousin sent a short text saying there had been calls from a lender, then a tow truck in my parents' driveway. My sister had moved back into her old room to save money. The car tied to the loan was gone. Budgets were being rewritten without the shortcut of my paycheck. The safety net they had always assumed I would provide was finally missing. The attempts to pull me back did not stop. My mother's voicemail circled around loyalty and forgiveness. My father sent a long message about duty and sacrifice, as if refusing to pay meant I no longer cared. My sister's texts came in bursts, accusing me of letting them drown when I knew how to swim. Every word carried the same belief, that my stability belonged to them. I stayed silent for a few days. Then I wrote one last email. I said I had listened to how they spoke about me at my grandmother's table and that I believed them. I explained that I would not pay for their decisions anymore, that I would not answer calls about overdue bills, surprise expenses, or new projects that depended on my income. I said I needed distance and that pushing on money would not change my answer. There were no threats and no long explanations, just a clear line. After I sent it, I blocked their numbers. It did not feel like slamming a door. It felt like turning off a faucet that had been running for so long I had stopped hearing it. My parents disappeared from my contacts. The family thread went quiet. My sister's name stopped flashing across my screen. The silence that followed was sharp at first, then strangely calm. The next weeks, I cleaned up what still belonged to me. With one of the advisors at the bank, I went through every account and removed the last pieces of shared access and old permissions. The loan with my name on it remained, but we made a plan for how I would answer the lender without erasing the cost for anyone else. Facts replaced panic. I stopped treating their balance as a verdict on my character. Outside of work, my life stayed ordinary and finally felt like mine. I bought a few things for my apartment and did not translate each purchase into how many bills it could have covered for someone else. I went for walks without my phone in my hand. I cooked simple meals for one and did not feel like I had failed at building a life. Nothing about those moments looked dramatic from the outside. Inside, they felt like proof that my time and money were finally under my own name. Months passed. Holidays came and went. Through relatives, I heard my parents had met with someone from the lender and agreed to a strict payment schedule. My sister had picked up extra work and sold a few things she used to show off at family gatherings. The debt was still there, but it was finally being carried by the people who had earned it. My life no longer had to twist itself around their emergencies. I still remember the night my sister lifted her glass and turned me into the joke about money and failure. I used to replay that scene as the moment everything broke. Now I see it as the moment I finally believed what they had been telling me. They liked having a person they could push into the background while depending on her to keep their ground steady. I was the only one who changed anything after hearing that truth. Walking away did not make me a failure. It made me honest about who my family had chosen to be and about what I would no longer accept. If there is any lesson in this, it is that a boundary is not cruelty. People who have lived off your silence will call it selfish. People who are used to your unpaid work will say you turned your back on them. They are allowed to feel that way. You are still allowed to stop. You are allowed to let adults face the weight of their own choices, even when they share your last name. I do not know what my parents and my sister tell other people about me now, and I do not need to. The story I live with is simpler. I go to work, I pay for what is mine, and I keep my dignity. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you for listening. If this made you look twice at your own boundaries, or at the cost of confusing loyalty with self-erasure, I am glad you were here.